At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned. Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be a special bonus episode of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Lived Them. A week ago, I released episode 499. Okay, we should be going to episode 500. However, this is going to be a bonus episode in between. This is going to be an Imagine Listening session that I did at the National NENA conference in Grapevine, Texas, which was an amazing and powerful session. The room was packed, and the stories, wow, I can't even describe them. The feeling in that room, I mean, I've told people many times that it's hard to describe what it is like to be in an Imagine Listening session, but those who have been there know exactly what I'm talking about. And this also marked the 10-year anniversary of my partnership, but also doing the podcast at the National NENA conference. So that was amazing. Also, the Imagine Listening book was launched, and it sold out. It sold out right away, and we're already going into our second printing of it. So if you ordered a book, thank you so much for the support. And a big thanks goes out to all of those who submitted stories for the I Am 911 movement and those who continue to share. Thank you so very much. This is book 1 of a series of books that are going to be coming out for that. And if you want to order a book as well, you can do so by going to links.co/WTT podcast. That's links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. And you can order from Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, or anywhere that you can order a book from. You can find Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our every day. And this episode not only has audio from those who shared stories during that session, but also written stories. I have that audio in there as well. So after this will be an epic episode 500. The first part was originally recorded at the Mayan Ranch this past March 2023. And that was such a great session. And then I did a part 2 with a live audience as well at this National NENA conference that was in Grapevine, Texas. So thank you once again, everyone, for being there. And without further ado, here is our special bonus episode of Within the Trenches podcast, featuring stories from Imagine Listening and the I Am 911 movement, those who were there at the session. Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You have witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine your 911 taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents scream while they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way, and you give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as he performs CPR. "Come on, buddy. Come on," is what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like within the trenches of 911. In this episode, you will hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls the 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we are here together at the 2023 National NENA Conference in Texas. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who live them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story. Become the dispatcher who has taken each call and imagine listening. Now that intro, that was actually my call. That was the story that started the entire movement. I put it out there, and I asked others to do the same, and people have been sharing ever since. It ended up spawning I Am 999 and I Am 000 in the UK and Australia. It was almost as if the entire thin gold line had unified for all of us, our own, to share these stories so that people would know more about what it is that you do, that you're not just answering the phone. Those calls stick with you. But that was my call. Does anyone have a story they would like to share?
It was a music event, and she was walking to get her bicycle to go home with her friends, and he just grabbed her from behind, took her behind a stage, and raped her. And then she called like 20 minutes later, and I told her to not shower and to wait there kind of on scene and everything like that. So I was actually able to meet her at the end of the trial, the sentencing, and she had the most powerful talk to her. They found the guy and basically told him, like, I am not going to let this destroy my life, and I hope that you now know, like, what you did is going to impact me in a positive way. I'm not going to let this be, like, a negative story. So it ended up really cool. I was able to give her a hug. She thanked me because I told her to not shower. They were able to get DNA and find the guy.
So I was working, I work in a one-man center, and we work close with the sheriff's office. And I took a call from a lady who got home late. She had made sure her kids were in bed, and she was looking for her husband, and she couldn't find him anywhere. She went to the garage, and she found that he had hung himself. So I called everyone, per protocol, like I was supposed to. And it wasn't until the chief of police, because it was in the city jurisdiction, he said to call the sheriff, that it was a deputy. And it wasn't until that I had to call the sheriff that I found out that it was my best friend, that we had just gotten off shift together, and that he was someone who had done, we had talked, because we would talk on the phone as he would do transports. But you don't realize, you do the job, you do everything you have to. It's not until someone, something in your mind clicks that, oh my God, I just got done talking to his wife.
Thank you.
So I was probably about a year into working in the first center that I was at, and we had received a phone call from a mother stating that she couldn't get a hold of her adult daughter and her boyfriend. And we knew that there had been some domestic issues with her ex-husband. So we sent officers out there. While our deputies were en route, we received a phone call from a child that was 6 years old. He was the son of the mother who had told us that his mom and her boyfriend had been shot by her ex-half, which was not his father. He was able to give us very detailed information on how the bodies were positioned, where it was at, where they were at. He had an older sister with him. He had said that his sister had ran off with her father, who was the one that did the shooting, but he didn't know where he was at. I talked to that child for 45 minutes on the phone, trying to make sure that he was in a safe place before my deputies got on scene. I always just kind of wonder where he's at now. He would have graduated high school already because this is over 10 years ago. So,
Thank you for sharing. My first shooting was my hardest to this day. I'm from small town nowhere. I never thought it would happen, but it did. When I heard shots fired and heard them over the radio, my heart sunk. A man and woman had made it look like they were out of gas and hijacked an 18-wheeler. I was on the line with a truck driver who managed to get away. I had a span of 2 county services en route. My sheriff, an ex-county officer, shot down the man because he charged at them. He later died. The female is awaiting trial. But today, I still feel the effects of the shooting. However, not sure how, I still managed to finish my shift that day. 2 years ago, this past July, I'm going on 5 years in 911. I am 911. I answered the 911 line to hear screams from a young man on the other end. He had just watched his dad crash his motorcycle coming around the curve. I could hear his dad agonal breathing as I was trying to get his location. Within seconds, I discovered this was in a neighboring county. I transferred the call to the correct agency and did what I was supposed to, but felt utterly helpless that I couldn't start people sooner. I think of you and your dad often. I am 911. I was the last person you spoke to before you took your life. You called our non-emergency line. You told me you were going to take your life, your location, and to send someone to retrieve the gun. You hung up after I asked your name. My officers found you by your brother's grave. I wish you had given me a chance to help you. I am 911. I took a cell from a father telling me he had just shot his 4-year-old daughter. They had just gotten home from a camping trip, and he was cleaning his pistol, and it went off, went through the wall, and struck her in the head. He was so calm, probably from shock. I can still hear his voice and how he just sounded defeated. I remember he told me, I don't want to say it, but I'm pretty sure she's gone. I stayed on the phone with him until the first units got on scene. I remember hearing his wife crying in the background. I am 911. I work in a large communications center. We have dispatchers and call takers. We are not cross-trained. The biggest issue our staff has is the fact we never get closure. There was one officer, though, that would come to the center after particularly tough calls and talk to us. She would tell us what happened, why, and what the outcome was. Sometimes what we thought was devastating was a funny call. And if it was bad, she would let us know that too. It was therapeutic for her and for us. We all became very close. She brought us snacks and goodies and never forgot to tell us thank you. She committed suicide last February. The last text I got from her said, "Sometimes the helper needs help too." Not sure if she was talking to me or about herself. I miss her dearly. I am 911.
This, I shared this once before. This was a call that actually broke me after being involved in dispatch for quite a while, but one that I never actually shared it entirely with, and there's somebody important with us today that needs to hear it as well. But it was a call that I took, even after I've been in dispatch for 15 years. I was involved in EMS for 25 years. I had scraped bodies up off the highway. I've taken, the domestic violence calls, the pleas for help, the screaming parents of their lifeless infant, and thinking I was a brick shithouse. Nothing was going to break me. I'd seen everything. I'd heard everything. And one afternoon, I take a call from a 10-year-old boy who came home from school and found his father had committed suicide in the basement. He was pretty graphic in the details, so I knew there was nothing this child was going to be able to do. So I told him, go get out of the basement, go back upstairs. And as he's going up the stairs, he encounters his 6-year-old sister. And I hear her in the background say, "Is Daddy downstairs? I want to show him the picture I made in school." When I heard that, my heart went into my stomach after it came out of my throat. And I was at a loss for words. I didn't know what to do. I basically froze. Because the only thing I could think about is that little girl hearing how proud she was of this picture she wanted to show her daddy. And her 10-year-old brother says, Daddy wants us to go upstairs and work on our homework and do our chores before dinner. And I was just like, wow. Yeah, that's it. Do that. They lived in a remote part of the county where it took a long time for state police to get there. I even tried calling neighboring units to get there sooner just to try and get a safer environment for these children to be in. And I stayed on the phone with him. I could have transferred the call to state police, but I didn't. I wanted to keep it. And listening to this young boy talk to his little sister, help her with her homework, it was like he'd aged 20 years in 5 minutes. It was a 17-minute phone call that just never seemed to end. When it was time I finally was able to disconnect when we finally got law enforcement on scene. As I sat there, my chest hurt, my stomach churned. I asked my supervisor, "Hey, can I take a break? I need to step out." And as I walked by, he stopped me. He says, "Hey, G, are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm fine." And he's like, "All right, well, don't take too long because we got storms coming." All right. I went out to our back patio, and I cried for this kid. I cried for what he saw. I cried for his sister, what she was going to have to eventually find out that her father wasn't there anymore. But then really bothered me was the fact that to this day, I don't know if that kid ever actually got to cry. The way he matured on the phone that fast, did he ever actually get a chance to cry like I did that day? Did he lose his childhood at the same time? I am 911.
Thank you.
This would have been several years ago. It was a couple days before Christmas, and road conditions weren't great. And I got a call from a guy who didn't know where he was, but he had just witnessed a Jeep go off the road at a corner and flip, ejected the female driver, and was on top of her. And we were having technical issues with our location features in our system that I wasn't aware of. And I had a good within 15 meters, so I hit accept alley without realizing that it was actually only grabbing at the time the location of the cell phone tower. So I got responders going to a location that was all the way across our county. Stayed on the line with a guy until others showed up and were able to give me a better location, but it took responders about 16 minutes to get there. She was alive the entire time. and I could hear her in the background. Begging them to just lift the Jeep off, and they were begging me to give them instructions on what to do and how to do it, and I had to tell them not to move the Jeep or not to move her. And stayed on the line and listened to her and them the whole time. And just kicking myself that my responders weren't getting there fast enough because I made a mistake. I learned later that as soon as they got there and they moved the Jeep, she passed away almost immediately. That was what was keeping her alive, and whether they had gotten there in seconds or in an hour, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. But yeah, she was a mom 2 days before Christmas, just.
Thank you.
So mine is infant CPR call, which I'm sure we've all had. This call lasted 10 to 15 minutes. I had the dad on the phone. We were doing what I thought was good CPR the whole time. They get there. The infant unfortunately passed away. And they're out there for several hours before they make any notifications beyond that. And it turned out that the father had killed the infant and was never doing CPR, just had me tricked. And it's still, and this was over a decade ago, it still sticks with me. Did I miss something? Was there something I should have noticed? Could I have done something differently? And I still think about it, but just one of those things. And then I also ended up talking to the mom after the fact because the neighbor had called her. The dad didn't even call her. A neighbor had called her, and so she called freaking out. I couldn't tell her anything. I just had to listen to her crying, screaming, and there was just nothing. And that's the worst part, not being able to do anything.
I think that's probably one of the hardest things is we're always questioning ourselves, just like you were saying. Before you go, sir, just really quick, an infant call that I took that really, and I'm just going to say it this way, that really fucked me up when I was in dispatch. What helped me was the fact that the sergeant came in and told me exactly what happened and that there was nothing that I could do. And that was the one thing that helped, was knowing that confirmation that I had done everything right. And that's what I needed. So I hope to God that there are those moments where you can have someone tell you that so that you know, so that you don't question it later on, because that's one of the hardest things. Thank you for sharing, all of you who have been sharing. Go ahead, sir.
So my call was a couple summers ago, and live in a part of the country that we don't have the heat like Texas does, but we're above 7,000 feet, so the sun feels like it's right on top of you. But a call from a local veterinary office that as soon as the phone rang was just a blood-curdling screams and cries, and it was a mother who gone to work that day. She was a vet, came out after the end of her shift. She worked like 7:30 to 5-ish, something like that. So about 5:30 in the evening, came out and loading everything back up in the car, found that she had left her child in the car seat all day. And trying to get information out of her, it was worthless. She was a wreck, obviously, couldn't do anything. Finally got a bystander that picked up the phone from her because she was kind of piled outside the car just crying. And he was obviously dead, but you try to look to see can you make sure, can you check, but if not, don't move him because there's obviously investigation, stuff like that. I also work for the coroner's office there also, so that was right at the end of shift. Then I had to go on that call as the coroner as well. Come to find out she had dropped other kids off to school, got to work, even got the dogs that she took to work out of the car, left the baby in the car. And then I sat and had to hold that kid for about 45 minutes in the hospital while we tried to convince the mom to hold him one last time before we took him away on the coroner side of things. And if you ever stand around holding a child, it's just automatic that you start rocking back and forth because you're holding a baby. And that one has stuck with me for sure.
So mine kind of follows the last two. We're from Texas, and so in the middle of summer, y'all already know it's extremely hot here. Middle of July, a couple of years ago, I took a call from a gentleman, from a man who said that his girlfriend's daughter was not breathing. I could hear the coldness and the callousness in his voice. We do police only, so I transferred over to medical, and they tried to instruct CPR. I could tell that he was not performing CPR, and so it kind of bothered me. The child was about 2 years old at the time, and when I got off the call, I said, there's something not right about this. So the officer went out there, and it came back later that I think it was like 103 or 104 degrees that day. He had shoved that 2-year-old child in a backpack and put her in the trunk and left her to die. He was not the biological father of the child. He was just mom's boyfriend. Sorry. He was arrested, and he was unapologetic for anything he did. I also had a nephew that was the same age at the time, and so he liked to wear his little backpack around the house with his toys in it. And every time I saw that, with him wearing that, it would trigger me. Almost like I would go into a panic attack, or like my anxiety would trip off. So that one sticks with me.
Mine's not necessarily sad, but I more so wish I could say sorry to more of the individuals that I've talked to, especially when I've been a bad attitude bear. And, you know, I'm having an off day, so unfortunately I sometimes take it out on the caller. This one lady calls in, and I told her it's okay after she said she was sexually assaulted with a firearm at her head. And I said, it's okay. And I remember her saying, it's not okay. And I really wish I could apologize to her now, and I haven't thought about that in 5 years. And recently, the man was just convicted, and he's going to be in jail for the rest of his existence. And it's a forever protective order on him now. So.
I had a mom call, and I was annoyed with my son at the time. I was arguing, and my son was 19, and her son was 19, and she hadn't heard from him all day. And in my mind, I'm like, he's 19. You know, kids do that. They don't text you right back. They don't call you right back. So she was telling me that, no, something was just not right. And I was doing the normal, you know, how's he been acting, you know, etc. She was on her way home. She gets in her apartment, and she said, I don't see him. And I said, okay, does he drive? Was his car out there, etc.? And she said, the door's shut. And she went to open it, and it was locked. And I begged her not to kick it in. I said, wait on the officers, because something just told me what was on the other side of that door. And being a mom, I knew exactly the same thing I would do. And there he was, he had shot him. And listen to her scream when she found him. As I'm fighting with my own son over something completely ridiculous. It definitely put, you know, everything in perspective for me, not to blow off callers, not to think, oh, it's just normal teenage behavior. So I think I take them more serious now. And I'm the type, I have to put faces with things. So I did look up her son's obituary.
and the resemblance of my son.
I took a call from an ER nurse of a 21-month-old child that I had obviously been deceased for quite a while, was cold to the touch. The parents took the baby to the ER. She had bruises all over her, and come to find out, they had picked her up from the daycare this way and drove all around town picking up all of their other children from different schools and whatnot before they went to the emergency room. So they drove around town for close to an hour with their deceased toddler in their car. The child was special needs because of some medical issues, I'm not sure what. No charges were pressed because the death was a natural death. But just the fact that they not only drove around with her for over an hour, but exposed all of their other children to their deceased sibling laying in the car was just unfathomable to me.
I had only been doing the job just over a year, and about a week or so before this had happened, I had made the decision of like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I had taken a call where the guy, after being very calm and giving me all of his information, like, I was messing around and I accidentally shot my buddy in the face. And he was just, okay, this is what we're gonna do. And he just started to spiral and started to say he was a United States, and I cut him off, like, we're gonna do all of our EMD protocols and everything and get him help. And then I was sitting there in the back of my mind of, well, is he breathing? He has a pulse, but he's shot in the face. So I'm hoping like something superficial and he's just in shock because he's not awake or whatever, so we're gonna control that bleeding. I didn't give CPR instructions, and I was really worried about that one. And I found out afterwards in the after action review that it wouldn't have helped anyways. But I was so concerned if he does CPR, because the gun's still right next to him after I got that gun location, officers coming in are going to end up shooting him too. And with all of that extra movement and with the guns, I was like, nope, we're just controlling that bleeding. And after they get on scene and I end the call, my supervisor was standing right there with me and asked if I was okay. And I looked at him, I said, I can guarantee you, I would bet my job, both of them were in the military, guaranteed. Just because he started to say he was a United States blank. And nobody else besides other military people refer to other people that way. And both of them ended up being in the local Army Guard. And I knew other people in his unit. I didn't know either of them, but I knew other people I had heard the story from other people, like, I know exactly who you're talking about. But
I think one of the hardest types of calls for me is situations where you have an open line where all you can do is listen. And this was a couple months ago, actually. I had an open line with an obvious physical dispute in progress, male and female. And it was pretty obvious that the female had called and just put the phone next to her. And she was just describing everything that was happening to her and just begging for him to stop. You know, please stop choking me. Please don't hurt me. We can work through this. I love you. I'm sorry. And she kept pleading for her life, basically. And I sat on that phone for 23 minutes before anyone was able to get there. And during the call, I heard a little kiddo in the background saying, please stop hurting my mom. You're hurting mommy, please. And just, you know, in those situations, all you can do is keep typing. Do your research, figure out where they are, check phone history, check, you know, previous calls, check the address, and just listen. And hearing her plead for her life, for her kid's life, for the kid to plead for mom's life too, and just waiting for someone to get there. And then when you finally hear that, police open up or stop running, there was at least that satisfaction that you were able to get someone there eventually.
Thank you, all of you, for sharing stories today. And if you didn't share a story, it's okay, because you were here in support. And that's what this is all about. For a long time, it felt like we weren't allowed to feel, right? You take a phone call, you go to the next one, and you just continue. There wasn't really a lot of resources. And now there is a lot of resources. But also, we're realizing that it's okay for us to even talk to each other. Our most powerful weapon is our voice. But for a long time, it just seemed like we couldn't use it, at least for each other. But we are. It's a new day. Things have changed. They're continuing to change. And it's because of all of you, the job that you do, the calls that you take, and the way you just respond to them. Don't be afraid to reach out to each other. I did that for a long time. I buried my calls. And once I started talking about it, once I stopped giving a shit what people would think, the whole weakness thing for asking for help, it was therapeutic. And that's how all of this got started. So thank you again for what you do and for sharing these stories. And a round of applause for those who've shared, please. I want to thank everyone once again for sharing your stories. And even if you didn't share a story during that session, it's okay, because you were there in support of all the others that were sharing. So thank you so very much for being there, being supportive of each other, and for submitting stories for the I'm 911 movement. And I couldn't do what I do without all of you. And that goes for the book as well. If it wasn't for all of you, this would be it wouldn't be what it is today. So again, thank you for the support, for the job that you do, and for having the courage to open up and to share, because it is therapeutic. It's okay not to be okay. And we're here for each other. That's what this is all about. And I appreciate more than you know the trust that you have in me in sharing your stories out there to the world. I'm humbled and honored to do it, and I will continue to put those out there for time to come. So again, thank you. This live broadcast, or this live audience broadcast that was on there, this whole broadcast, this episode has been sponsored by InDigital, a leader next gen core services. Shout out to patrons and Facebook subscribers of the podcast in general, all of you who have been in support, who share, and just everything. Thank you so very much. If you ever want to be a guest on the show, if you ever have any comments or questions, anything like that, you can email us, and that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us all over social media, and you can simply do that by going to the link in the bio, or just what's here on the screen. Or if you're listening right now, it's links.co/WTT podcast, and that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. Everything is listed there. Social media, newest episode, where to order the Imagine Listening book, how to become a subscriber of the podcast for bonus material, discounts to the store, all that good stuff, and also a link to the store as well. So make sure to check that out. Again, thank you so very much. And this can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as Twitter. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.